It was billed as a women's retreat weekend where you'll meet other women and have so many activities and drink by the pool and spend time with the Duchess of Sussex. Well, turns out she showed up for about 30 minutes and then she split immediately. They were then shacked up with strangers. They paid thousands of dollars for this dumb thing. And needless to say, a lot of them are now furious. So much so that they're demanding refunds.
What happened here, that the girl was drawing and Meghan was fiddling with her jewelry, merching her stuff and whatnot, and the girl put the...
There's a particular kind of failure that is louder than silence and quieter than protest. It does not arrive with booing crowds or burning effigies or the dramatic theater of public outrage. It arrives, instead, with a spreadsheet, with a poll, with an empty seat at a gala dinner table, with a ticket price slashed by half the week before an event, with a promoter sliding into Instagram direct messages at 11 o'clock the night before a retreat, chasing last-minute sales in a room that was supposed to have sold out months ago. Australia did not boo Harry and Meghan. That is the part that nobody in the Sussex communications team can quite bring themselves to say out loud. Australia did something worse. Australia did the math.
Well, in 2018, Paul, is because the Australian public didn't know Meghan Markle very well. Well, they know her now. And what do they know her to be? A gold-digging grifter.
I love you.
That is
and the
not
math,
back.
when you line it up in one place, the Roy Morgan polling data, the retreat attendance figures, the ticket repricing, the venue downgrades, the editorial columns, the vox pops, the one woman reading her book on Bondi Beach while the Duchess of Sussex stood 3 feet away, does not tell the story of a controversy or a backlash or a bad week. It tells the story of a verdict, a quiet, polite, statistically devastating, thoroughly Australian verdict. That is the story this document tells, not with opinion, but with receipts. The polling data is public. The ticket sales are documented. The retreat attendance figures came from inside the organizers' own communications. The editorial columns ran under named bylines in the Sydney Morning Herald, the Daily Beast, and the Sun. The vox pops were filmed by the BBC.
Oh, wow. Which also is hilarious because Gemma up on the Besties Instagram had put up, we still have rooms left. Only a few. Right before, and of course, Meghan's people call her like, take that down. And so it was taken down, but not before I got a screen.
The Roy Morgan poll sampled 1,700 Australians, and the numbers were published without editorial comment because the numbers required none. This is the story of a 4-day commercial tour that went to Australia to prove a point, that Harry and Meghan still commanded the kind of global attention that justifies premium pricing, that the Sussex brand still carried enough residual warmth from 2018 to fill a $3,000 a ticket wellness retreat, that the Australian public would still turn out in numbers that make the barriers and the security detail and the commercial infrastructure feel proportionate, and discovered, methodically and publicly, that the point could not be proven. The court of public opinion has adjourned. The data is in, and this is what the data says. To understand the scale of what happened in Australia in April 2026, you have to understand what was supposed to happen. The Sussex team, the communications apparatus, the event organizers, the commercial partners, the security detail, the affiliated brands and platform partners, arrived in Australia with the specific narrative they intended to tell. It was the narrative of the triumphant return, the narrative of two people who had stepped away from institutional royal life.
Enough to pay this sort of money, I have zero sympathy for, so whatever.
You've stolen my thunder. Exactly my thoughts. If you are stupid enough to have bought a ticket to sit with that woman for whatever length of time, then suck it up.
Had built something independent and substantial on their own terms, and were now returning to a country where they had, in 2018, experienced one of the most warmly received royal tours of recent memory. That 2018 tour was, by virtually every metric, a success. The crowds were real. The energy was genuine. The images of the young couple, Harry in his military bearing, Meghan visibly pregnant with their first child, both of them radiating the specific kind of glamour that attaches to new royal couples before familiarity has had time to erode it, traveled around the world. Australia was good to Harry and Meghan in 2018. The Australian public gave them warmth that, at the time, felt freely and generously offered. The comparison is now available in video form, archived and easily accessible. A split screen of 2018 and 2026. On one side, actual crowds, barriers straining against genuine public enthusiasm.
How many people did attend? It's Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex. How could Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex, drive this small crowd? I'm pretty sure that not
Faces
every...
pressing forward. The specific electricity of a moment when celebrity and royalty and human curiosity converge into something that looks, from a distance, like love. On the other side, empty barriers. A handful of onlookers. Security personnel, with nothing particularly urgent to do. The specific low-energy atmosphere of an event that was planned for a crowd that did not arrive. The commentators who covered both tours described the 2026 footage as sad. That word, sad, not angry, not outraged, not hostile, is itself the data point. Outrage generates energy. Sadness generates nothing. And nothing, for a commercial enterprise built on the currency of public attention, is more dangerous than indifference. The Roy Morgan poll is the place to begin, because it is the most precise and the least deniable piece of evidence in this story. Released in the final days of the Sussex Australia tour, the poll sampled approximately 1,700 Australians, a sample size that, by standard polling methodology, is sufficient to draw statistically significant conclusions about broader Australian public opinion. The results were not ambiguous. 81% of respondents said their opinion of Harry and Meghan did not improve during the tour. Let that number sit for a moment. 81%. That is not a narrow majority. That is not a slight lean. That is an overwhelming, multi-demographic, statistically robust expression of a single idea. The tour did not work. Whatever it was supposed to achieve in terms of public rehabilitation, public warmth, or the demonstration of continued relevance, it did not achieve it for 4 out of every 5 Australians who were polled about it. 75% of respondents said Meghan did not show them a more positive side of herself during the tour. Again, 3/4 of the sample. Not a slim majority. A supermajority. The kind of number that, in any political context, would be described as a landslide. 87% said they doubted the tour would help repair Harry's relationship with his father, King Charles III. This last number is perhaps the most revealing, because it suggests that the Australian public had internalized not just the surface failures of the tour, the retreat numbers, the thin crowds, the empty barriers, but the deeper narrative context in which those failures sit. The damaged relationship with the palace, the letters patent question, the years of public conflict between a son and an institution. The Australian public, polled at the end of a 4-day commercial visit, was not simply responding to the events of those 4 days. It was responding to 5 years of accumulated evidence about who these two people are, what they have done, and what they are trying to do. And it was calmly, with the specific directness that characterizes Australian public discourse at its best, saying, "We see it, we always saw it, and we have stopped pretending otherwise." The retreat. This is where the story becomes most specific, most documented, and most damaging for the Sussex brand's long-term commercial viability. It was called, or at least, it was marketed under promotional language that implied the name, Her Best Life. The venue was the Intercontinental Coogee Beach. The package included 2 nights of accommodation, a gala dinner, yoga sessions, sound healing, a coaching session, and the headline attraction, an in-person conversation with the Duchess of Sussex at the Friday night gala. Tickets were sold at 2 tiers. The standard tier was priced at $2,699 Australian dollars. The VIP tier, which gave you a solo room rather than shared accommodation with a stranger, was $3,199 Australian dollars. The capacity was 300 attendees. The pitch, as understood by the women who bought tickets, was a weekend, not a 2-hour appearance. A weekend, the chance to be part of a curated experience with other women, to swim, to eat, to drink by the pool, to participate in the full program, and to spend meaningful time in proximity to the Duchess of Sussex across multiple days and multiple events. This is what was marketed. This is what was understood by the purchasers. This is what the word retreat implies and has always implied. What was delivered was different. Meghan arrived at the Intercontinental shortly after 5 o'clock on Friday afternoon. She participated in approximately 2 hours of Q&A with the retreat organizer, Gemma O'Neill. At just after 7 that evening, she was in the back of a Range Rover, heading to a Waratahs rugby match with Harry. Her paying guests were sitting down to a gala dinner main course that she would not be present to share with them. By Sunday morning, the first reports began to emerge. Radar Online cited 2 anonymous insiders. The language, verbatim from their reporting. Organizers owe answers. Some girls are asking for refunds. A source described a friend who had paid all that money and was promised a whole weekend of fun, food, drinks, and activities, only to find out Meghan stayed for 30 minutes. The 30 minutes figure and the 2 hours figure represent different accounts of the same event. What is not disputed is the substance. Meghan left the retreat early, well before the weekend had concluded, well before the program her paying guests expected her to be present for had been completed, and attended a sporting event with her husband. The Sussex spokesperson's response, issued to the Press Association, was precise and carefully worded. The statement said that Meghan was always confirmed only to attend a retreat for her Q&A portion of the weekend. Read that sentence carefully. It says two things simultaneously, and the tension between them is the entire story. It says, first, that the contract was fulfilled. The Q&A happened. Whatever was formally agreed to was delivered. Meghan was not in breach of any contractual obligation. From a strictly legalistic standpoint, the job was done. But it also says, second, that the marketing was someone else's problem, that the expectation of a weekend, the reasonable, good faith understanding of women who paid up to $3,000 for what was marketed and understood to be an immersive 2-day experience with the Duchess of Sussex, was not Meghan's responsibility to manage. The gap between what was sold and what was delivered was, in the official Sussex accounting, the organizer's gap, not theirs. This is a legally defensible position. It is not a morally coherent one, and the Australian women who paid for a weekend and received 2 hours understand the difference. The organizer's own communications tell a parallel story that is, in some respects, more damaging than the retreat itself. In the days leading up to the event, Gemma O'Neill, the woman who organized and promoted the retreat, was actively engaged in last-minute ticket sales through her Instagram presence. Specifically, according to multiple accounts that have since been documented in press coverage, she was sliding into direct messages on Instagram, personally reaching out to potential attendees to chase final ticket purchases. This is not what a sold-out event looks like. This is what an event in commercial distress looks like. A promoter who has sold 300 tickets at $3,000 apiece does not need to be in the DMs the night before the event. A promoter who has not sold 300 tickets, who is looking at a room with significantly fewer than the contracted number of attendees, does whatever she can in the final hours to close the gap. The figure that has since been reported for actual attendance is 119 people, not 300. 119. This number came to public attention through a specific mechanism. Prior to the event, on the official Instagram page associated with the retreat, the page run by Gemma O'Neill or her team, a post appeared noting that there were still rooms available. Not a vague spaces left notice. Rooms. The kind of language that signals, to anyone reading it with commercial literacy, that the event was not close to capacity. The post was removed, but not before someone had taken a screenshot. A screenshot that was subsequently shared, circulated, and cited in press coverage of the retreat. The internet's memory is longer than any promoter's delete function. 119 attendees in a room designed for 300, and the gap between those two numbers, the 181 empty seats at a gala dinner that was supposed to validate the commercial viability of the Sussex brand in Australia, is the most precise single measurement of what this tour actually delivered. The Q&A itself, when it happened, produced footage that has been analyzed at length by commentators who cover the Sussex story professionally. Among the moments that attracted the most commentary was a brief interaction between Meghan and a young girl who was present at the event. The girl was drawing in a book, absorbed, as children often are, in her own world, with the specific self-containment that children deploy when they are in adult spaces they did not choose. Meghan apparently moved toward the girl and reached toward her drawing. The girl's response was immediate and unambiguous. She moved the book away. She did not want Meghan to touch it. She communicated this in the direct, unfiltered way of children who have not yet learned the social performance of politeness, without hesitation. It was a small moment, a 3-second exchange, and the commentators who noted it were not doing so cruelly. They were noting what the moment illustrated about the gap between the Meghan of the official narrative, the warm, empathetic, emotionally attuned public figure who connects genuinely with ordinary people, especially children and the vulnerable, and the Meghan that children, who have not read the press releases and have not been briefed on the brand messaging, sometimes see clearly and respond to directly. Children are the one demographic for which there's no PR strategy. They do not process public figures through the filter of reputation management or brand identity. They respond to what is in front of them, and what was in front of this particular child was, apparently, something she instinctively wanted to keep her distance from. The footage circulated widely. The commentators who noted it were careful to say they could be wrong about what it showed. But the pattern, the death stare caught on camera at the Royal Children's Hospital, the former staffers describing PTSD-like responses to the same expression, the girl moving her book, does not sit comfortably with the official narrative of radiant warmth. The death stare footage is worth examining separately, because the provenance of the reporting around it is significant. At the Royal Children's Hospital in Melbourne, on the first day of the tour, a 3-second clip was captured by a cameraman present. In the clip, Meghan's chief of staff, Sarah Fosmo, reaches over and taps Prince Harry on the back. A redirect, a gentle professional intervention, steering him toward a waiting family. Meghan turns her head in response to this movement. The expression on her face in that moment, caught in the frame, held for roughly 3 seconds before she controls it, has been described, universally and across commentary from multiple countries, in one phrase, a death stare. The Daily Beast, citing Tom Sykes' Royal Podcast, reported on Tuesday evening that the clip had left former Sussex staffers anonymous, as all former Sussex staffers inevitably are, what the report described as PTSD-stricken. That specific phrase, in that specific context, is not casual hyperbole. It is the language of people who have seen something they recognize, people who have, in their own professional lives, been on the receiving end of that expression and know precisely what it means and what it costs. This is the pattern that critics have been describing since at least 2019. The allegation, never formally proven, always sourced to anonymous current or former staff, is that the public Meghan and the private Meghan are different entities, that the warmth displayed on camera, the emotional attunement, the demonstrative empathy, these are performances that require a specific context and a specific audience to be produced, and that behind them exists a different kind of behavior, directed at the staff and aides and organizers whose job is to create the conditions for the performance. No named individual has gone on camera to make this allegation in the specific, documented way that would constitute proof. The former staffers who have spoken have done so anonymously. The palace insiders who have described specific incidents have hidden behind source protection. Meghan's representatives have consistently denied all such characterizations. But the accumulation, the death stare clip, the 2014 Toronto video, the hospital visit where a source reportedly said she arrived and said, "Let's make this quick," the former staffers describing PTSD-like responses to footage, adds up to something that the public is increasingly unwilling to dismiss as tabloid fabrication. The Intercontinental Coogee Beach, the gala dinner tables with 3 or 4 people sitting at them in a room designed for 300, the barriers along Sydney streets with nothing much pressing against them, the footage comparison between 2018 and 2026 that has been watched millions of times, the Q&A that lasted 2 hours before the Range Rover arrived. All of this represents a commercial reality, but the commercial reality only exists in the context of the commercial expectation, and the commercial expectation was set not just by the Sussex team's marketing, but by history. By 2018, by the image of a young royal couple at the peak of their public warmth arriving in Australia for the first time, to the kind of reception that made news around the world. The reason the 2026 comparison is so devastating is not simply that the crowds are smaller. Crowds change. Public enthusiasm is not infinite. People have other things to do. The specific electricity of 2018 was partly a function of novelty. These were people nobody had quite seen together before, in a combination that nobody had expected, at the beginning of something that nobody had mapped yet. That kind of novelty only exists once. The reason the comparison is devastating is what it implies about the trajectory. In 2018, Australia loved Harry and Meghan because Australia didn't know them yet. The commentator who said this on air was not being cruel. He was being accurate. Australia knew Meghan Markle now. Australia had watched the Oprah interview and read the excerpts from Spare and followed the Netflix documentary and tracked the Spotify deal and the Archwell Foundation and the As Ever brand and the One-Off platform. Australia had, over 5 years of sustained media coverage, accumulated a picture of who these two people were. And in April 2026, Roy Morgan polled 1,700 of them and found that 81% of them had not been persuaded otherwise by 4 days in their country. The ticket pricing tells a story that is, in some ways, more telling than the attendance figures. The Intercontinental Summit, the event at which Harry spoke, separate from the retreat, focused on mental health, slashed its ticket prices by half before Harry took the stage. Half, not a modest discount, not a late bird sale, half price. When a promoter cuts ticket prices by 50% in the days before an event, there is only one possible explanation. Demand has not met supply. The number of people willing to pay the full price is significantly lower than the number of seats available. The options are to slash prices and fill the room, or hold prices and perform to empty chairs. The promoter chose to slash. At Meghan's Sydney event, Attendance was a topic of repertorial interest rather than a given to be taken for granted. Now consider the comparison the commentators have noted. That same weekend, in the same city, with overlapping demographics, Pamela Anderson, 58 years old, the subject of a career retrospective moment driven in part by her portrayal in a Hulu series she had nothing to do with, a woman who had not held a meaningful commercial public profile in years, was performing at a venue her promoter had quietly downsized from 9,000 seats to 2,500. Same weekend, same city, same broad demographic, women, a certain age range, drawn to a specific kind of celebrity. The capacity differential is remarkable. Anderson's event, even at its downsized venue, was calibrated for 2,500 people. The Sussex retreat was calibrated for 300, achieved 119, and required its organizer to be in the DMs the night before, chasing last-minute sales. Pamela Anderson and Meghan Markle in Sydney in the same week. Different demand curves. The data does not lie. The Sydney Morning Herald editorial has become the defining journalistic artifact of this tour, in a way that a single headline sometimes crystallizes what an entire news cycle has been trying to say. The headline described Australia as an ATM. The editorial, published on the Tuesday, the final day of the tour, the day before Harry and Meghan boarded their Qantas commercial flight and flew home without the waving departure ceremony, without the press pack, without the farewell editorial from anyone who wished them well, said what the Roy Morgan poll numbers had already shown in numerical form. Australia had been good to Harry and Meghan in 2018. They had come back to use it as a cash machine. The specific word the editorial used, ATM, is the language of commercial transactions stripped of human pretense. An ATM does not have feelings. An ATM does not offer warmth or community or emotional engagement. An ATM is a mechanism for extracting money. And the Sydney Morning Herald, one of Australia's oldest and most respected newspapers, was telling its readers that this is what Harry and Meghan had come to their country to do. This is not a tabloid headline. This is not the Daily Mail or Piers Morgan's show or a partisan commentator with an established anti-Sussex position. This is the Sydney Morning Herald, and the Sydney Morning Herald editorial board made a choice to use that specific word, ATM, with full awareness of what it means and what it accuses. Jane Moore's column in The Sun ran under a headline that was, in its own way, equally precise.